Yo, what's good? How's it going? Look, I'm glad you're here. My name is Albert Williams III, and welcome back to the Uncommon Legend Experience. And today we have another guest. We have a good friend of mine, Mary Ward. She and I've been friends for, gosh, 6, 7 years or so, give or take. And we've known each other a good amount of time. Mary was actually my boss at one point in time. And
So
I was
crazy.
I was not the what was it? I wasn't the assistant youth director. I was the assistant to the youth director. That whole bit. But Mary, tell everybody like who you are, a little bit about yourself, and we'll.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here and I'm excited to see you, Albert. I mean, it has been so much time since I feel like we started, and I was in the early days of youth ministry when we met in that capacity, and that's just feels like a lifetime ago, but also feels like
Really.
yesterday.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, so I now live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've
West.
served out west, and they call this the land of enchantment. And then the joke is that it's actually the land of entrapment because
Mm.
once you come here, you never leave. I'm case and point, I guess, for that being true. I moved out here almost 4 years ago now, and yeah, I know I love it. I It's so funny being a girl from the deep south and putting down roots out here. There's not quite as many blonde, blue-eyed women out
No.
here, and so it's made it pretty fun and interesting. That is for sure. But since moving out here, I've served two churches as senior pastor, and I've been serving as a pastor in the UMC now for almost a decade, which is crazy.
Crazy to think.
I know it's not quite a decade yet, but almost there. I actually just had my last Sunday at my church not too long ago, and now I'm working at a charter school in
Hmm.
Albuquerque. It's called Manal School, and it
Yeah.
was founded in the late 1800s. And I'm working as the director of development and alumni relations. So a little bit of a pivot to, finishing a Master of Divinity last year after all
Yeah.
that time it took to then going into a development role instead of pastoral ministry.
Right.
So, of course, lots of life and lots of discernment led to that choice. And so, I guess I'm in a transitional season myself at the moment, and I
Mm.
have a kitten, and it's sitting here on the desk with me, and she is the
Bless.
sweetest. So at least I have some sweetness in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. That's so awesome. Yeah, man. And so Mary is the definition of girl boss. And she also does some DJing and some. Are you still doing spin classes too?
Okay. So I taught spin classes for
Right.
6 years,
Yeah.
and last year I stopped teaching so that I could pursue DJing more
Okay.
with more frequency, just because I was getting more gigs, and I said,
Mm.
oh, I can only have one extracurricular in addition to my main work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, no, I'm like, actually, it's the craziest thing, Albert. I've become a like pretty successful DJ. I've
That's
opened for
crazy.
international like best-selling artists, and I
Yeah.
opened I opened for the guy that headlined the big stage at EDC this year in
Yeah.
Las Vegas. I got to open for his show here in Albuquerque that same week. So
Yeah.
I don't know what my life has become, but man, I am happy that I've been along for the ride. And we're not
Yeah.
done yet.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. So unpack that a little bit more. Like
Yeah,
how. So you got into DJing from like spin class because you had to
kind
like
of.
mix a little bit for like the classes. So
Yeah.
like how is that shaped and formed into this like new outlet really? Like how is that? How did that come about?
It's the craziest thing just because I went from one kind of spin to another kind of spin, spinning
Mm,
on the
yeah.
decks instead of spinning on the bikes.
Yeah.
But no, I'm actually a classically trained musician, and
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
played piano throughout my childhood, and I took lessons until I graduated, and then continued with some lessons in college. And so
Mm,
I've always loved vocal performance, although I myself am not a vocal performer. I mean, I like to sing,
mm,
and especially, man, in a worship setting, you'll hear me singing the loudest just because I love it,
yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
worshiping the Lord. I'm worshiping the Lord, and I love to worship in that way through singing.
Mm,
And it was really neat that those skills started to come back out through spin class. And so while I was preparing playlists and class maps, all of the stuff that comes with with teaching spin,
Mm.
I essentially started learning how to make mixes. And so I learned how to start mashing stuff together like I had done on piano, but
Right.
with, other people's music.
Yeah.
So then this part of the story is kind of funny, but I went to Las Vegas for the first time a few summers ago, because flights to Vegas from Albuquerque are like $60 round trip.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And so I said, oh my gosh, there's these artists I've never been able to see. I want to go and see them in person. And so
Right.
I love going and catching their sets. And I actually try to go regularly just to go and see these artists because it's so inspiring to me.
Mm.
But I saw the energy and the way they mixed in such a cool way. And I said, I bet I could do that.
Yeah.
And I just was delusional enough to try, that's ultimately it. And so I started with DJing weddings.
Hmm.
And because I was officiating a funeral,
Mm.
and one of the people working in the funeral home said, oh, I DJ for this company and they're always looking for DJs. And I said, huh, not the place I expected to get a hookup for a wedding DJ company, but I guess I'll take it.
But we'll see. Yeah.
And it went really well, though. I enjoyed it a lot, but there were just a few little technical things where I wanted better gear. I wanted to do more. I
Mm.
wanted better opportunities. And really, I wanted to actually make some money if I was
Yeah.
putting in that much effort into weddings, and I really was getting paid like pennies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went to this event that's like open mic, but for
Hmm.
DJs. And so it's called Open Decks.
Yeah.
And you bring your music on a little flash drive, and if your name gets drawn, you get to play a 20 or 30-minute set depending on the night and
Hmm.
the opportunity. And so I started there and eventually learned a lot about like the equipment and different styles of mixing, and got really into house music and got pretty
Hmm.
good at mixing that. And so then the opportunities just kept coming. And so I play regular club sets now, which is so crazy. But
Yeah.
I will say I'm grateful that my conference leadership here in the United Methodist Church, they loved that I was doing this because I was getting out into these communities where
Mm.
like you're not going to commonly meet someone with a Master of Divinity who's been serving as a pastor, And I used the DJ name Preach Her,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
emphasis on her, Preach Her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it kind of led to not only, success in the DJ world, but also we have this big group chat with everyone. Like all the DJs in the community can be a part of this if they want to.
Mm.
And one day there were these protesters across the street from the bar where we have the Open Decks event. And it's just a wholesome, cool event. Like we're just, friends hanging out playing music.
Yeah.
There's nothing crazy about it. Yeah, some people might have a beer or two, but nothing crazy otherwise.
Right.
And so there was a Christian group across the street protesting just in general against the Christian people who stand on boxes and yell at people, that
Yeah.
kind of situation.
Yep.
And so someone put in our group chat, hey, it'd be great if our pastor could pull up. And that way, if they have questions, we'll just say, hey, go and talk to our pastor.
Yeah.
And man, that was such a cool moment where I realized, okay, I've authentically been able to be me and share the love of Jesus with people in all kinds of settings. And they see that,
Mm.
because so many people are reluctant to the word Christian, to the name
Mm.
Jesus. And I don't blame them a bit because there's been so much harm done. And I'm heavily involved with the LGBTQ community here in Albuquerque,
Mm.
especially in the nightlife world, and getting to speak up on their behalf and say, hey, y'all don't deserve to be treated like this, and holding church people accountable for
Yeah.
their abuse. That's been something I've been very passionate about. So sorry, that was so much of an
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
answer that you did not even ask for, but
No,
it's just a
I,
thread
I think
in
that's
my
part of it,
mind,
though.
of how it all
Yeah.
works together.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's part of it. I think like the biggest thing is being able to, authentically serve in the context that you're in, and that's what you've done. You've given. I'm gonna go churchanese for a little bit for those of you that might not be of that realm, but basically live the Shema, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, with all that you are. You're loving like your neighbor, right? And putting all of that into it, and you've done it through DJing, and I think that's why God gives us these outlets, right? These different gifts, and I mean, heck, that's why I'm creating content like more regularly now, because it's like, I might as well just go all in with all this thing, because one day, and it's actually happened here a little bit recently, I'm just doing my thing and somebody goes, man, I needed that today. Like
Mm.
I needed somebody to remind me of my sacred worth, like it's just that thing. And so essentially now people go, I can contact Mary, to like show up
Yeah.
and potentially fight on my behalf, but seriously,
Yes. Hey,
like
I
that
did
thing of,
though.
yeah,
I did.
yeah, yeah. And so like now you've gained this relationship, this trust, and you've built this. And I would argue that's what Jesus did with us, right? Like he
Mm.
showed up, he lived, he breathed, he sweat, he ate with us, probably made some good fish. But I was telling some students, I was preaching, and I was like, he was baking some mad cod over that fire at the end.
Mhm.
And like they're breaking bread. But like
Mhm.
I think that's the thing. It's just being available to do those things in the context that you're in. And so, and also because you're like stupid smart and you got all this education, now you can do a little bit more with it than just going, hey, I can read a book really well. But now
Yeah.
you're doing it practically.
Yes. Yes, that's the truth.
Man,
Hmm.
that's so
You
awesome.
know, that reminds me too. I so loved that, when you and I met, I was
Mm,
actively in seminary working on my Master of Divinity through Asbury. And then you started just like right around that same time too. It wasn't
mm,
long. But what I was grateful for during that season was I was learning these really complicated things and ideas and different areas of theology, and then got to break it down into simple bite-sized pieces to then teach to young teenagers.
mm,
And I think having that opportunity while in seminary is one of the greatest that we can have,
yeah.
because you're not keeping this knowledge in a world that's above like common understanding,
Hmm.
and I think that's being able to simplify the gospel to what it is, it reminds me of that meme where, oh gosh, I wish I could remember exactly what it was, where someone asks, or Jesus says, "Who am I?" And they go through this long narrative about like you are the eschatological manifestation of like all of these things, right? All these big words. And then at the end of it, it's like he finishes this long thing and Jesus just says, "What?" And I'm like, okay, no, I know Jesus
Huh?
knows these words. Like
Yeah.
Jesus understands, God understands our theology and our words
Right.
that we use. However, it was just such a good point to say, yeah, the gospel doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah.
Like we try to complicate, and of course those deep and serious conversations are so important, and I'm a
Yeah.
theological nerd,
Yeah. Yeah.
but just the simplicity, it's been helpful to remember that and to come back to those roots.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot all the time. I'll sit up and talk with students, and I try not to, like my students. They see me mentally like I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Not because I don't want to have the conversation, but because once you open the box, like my brain just dumps, and
Yep.
I know, you know how that feels
Hmm.
because it's like, oh
Yep.
well, in order to get to this thing, that means this. Oh, but then when we talk about this, we got to talk about this. And so, it always happens with church history too, by the way. Like it's specifically church history that they'll like somebody bring something up. I'm like, well, if we
Mm.
go there, we need to talk about the Council of Nicaea, but then,
Yeah.
we need to go to the Reformation. But also don't get hung up on that because, during the Great Awakening, this happened, and then later on, and this, and that's how we got here today. Huh? And I'm like trying.
Yes, but it all matters. Like that's the thing that's so hard, is it's all relevant. So like trying to figure out what out of the relevant information is most relevant in this moment. It's
Right.
so complicated. And
Yeah.
honestly, Albert, I will say my nerd moment is always about the manuscript tradition.
Yeah. Mm,
Like I so I'm visiting new churches at this point because
yeah.
I'm not serving as a pastor of one right now.
Right.
And so I went to one on Sunday, and it's my first time being in like almost a mega church setting in a minute. And so
Mm,
I was already fighting some feelings where I'm like, oh man, I miss my liturgy and the tradition that I grew to love, in so many ways. I'm like, oh gosh. But I'm not hating it at all,
no, no, no.
there's so much benefit, and it's a beautiful expression of worship as well.
Mm.
But during the sermon, the pastor said, there was something in parentheses, and the
Mm.
pastor referenced it, and he said, yeah, see, John included this so that we would know XYZ. It was about the woman at the well. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait a minute. It probably wasn't John. It was
Probably a
probably a
scribe.
scribal notation. Yes, and it was probably a later addition to help people within the context to understand what he was referring to.
Yeah.
And so I was with friends after that, and I said, okay, wait, we've got to look at the references. Let me go in the Bible. Let's go see if there's like a little footnote and where this
Get
part
the
comes
textual
from.
criticism.
Exactly. So textual criticism is like, that's where I geek out hard.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, 100%. I already know it. Yeah.
Yeah, yep,
Gosh.
yep. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's
two
so funny.
nerds.
Yeah, I know. And like, what's so funny is that I don't know if I can unblur. No, I can't. I can't unblur it. But like, I have that nerd, but then behind me is all these Funko Pops, and how me and my buddy Trey were talking about like anime and all these different things. And I'll never forget. Me and Kat were driving one day. It was probably about 2.5 years ago or so. We're driving, and I think I had just gotten back into classes in seminary because I took like a semester off. And I went to talking to her about this one thing, to talking about this thing with fundraising, to talking about this thing uh, in anime. And she goes, "Sweetheart, I don't think you realize you're kind of a genius." And I was like, "Shut up." I was like, "Shut up. No, I'm stupid." And for those of you that don't know, I actually have a learning disability. I'm dyslexic, and I've learned in the last few years, on the other side of dyslexia is ADHD. And I was like,
Mm,
huh, that explains everything. And why my brain was always doing this, or doing this really, every time I
mm,
try to read. And the way it happens a lot of times is I'll be texting someone, and I'll miss a word, or I'm typing or writing a paper, and I will write my complete thought, but there are words missing, but the thought is there. And so if you read it and you know me, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But if you don't, you're like, what are you saying? And so, she says that I'm thinking about all the little mistakes I make and all the things that I can't do. And she goes, nah, no one is able to keep up with all these things and is not intelligent, sweetheart. And I was like, okay, thanks, honey. I appreciate you. Right.
Cat's the best. I just have,
Yeah.
Cat's the best.
Oh no, she is. Every person that has been on, like, so I did an episode with a friend of mine earlier today. Trey actually went, and we all went to the same community college, but Trey was Kat's boss way back in like 2016, 2017. It's like so crazy. And my loctician, how I met my loctician, the lady that does my hair was through Kat, because she like this like whole Mary Kay thing, and Kat got invited to do like a free facial, and so Kat went, and I went. I was going to read my book. I was going to mind my business in the corner, and Kat was like, "Oh, you should totally come with me." And I was like, "Oh, fine, whatever."
Uh-huh,
But like,
uh-huh.
Kat was like, "Come on," and like the loctician, like Patrice is her name. She was like, "No, come on," and like, it's gonna be a couple's facial, and I'm like, great. But like, Kat is literally,
Got roped into
I
it.
know,
That's
but
hilarious.
she's arguably she has the best heart of like anybody I know. Like her ability to empathize and love people is, I mean, it's crazy. You can't put a real like measurement on it, because she finds another level all the time. And the funny thing is that she's the one with the shorter temper. So I just, but I
Yeah,
digress.
we'll strike that one from the record.
Oh no, Kat, I love you. You know I do. She'll beat me up later, but it's fine. So you've got you're a Theo sis, not a Theo bro, but you're really big. Sorry, but
That's good. That's fitting.
but like seminary, and you being a pastor, and then you DJing, like all these different things, I would argue is like a calling. And so could you unpack, because we talked about it before, like how big is your calling to like you as a person, and like how has that impacted you in terms of making decisions, like in
Mhm.
terms of like, hey, I should I should think about this and like the opportunities that present themselves.
Yeah.
But like, how has your calling helped you find new opportunities and open you up to opportunities that you never thought about?
Gosh, it's such a good question. And I think it's such a big answer that's required
Mm,
for that.
yeah.
And so I'll just take a little space, if that's okay, and share a
Yeah.
little bit more about like that history and how it happened.
Mm,
Because while I'm still the same person I've always been, I am very much not the same person
right, right,
I've
right.
always been.
Yeah.
Because, gosh, so just for a little context here,
Mm,
after moving to Albuquerque, or I guess when I moved to Albuquerque, I had just gone through a very difficult divorce. And you know this, but I'm sharing for people who don't know my
right, right.
story. And and it was tough.
Mm,
And so when I got to Albuquerque, I was in maybe the lowest place of my life, spiritually, emotionally, just everything. And I remember praying to God when I was walking into my brand new apartment. It was the winter here in Albuquerque. And I said, God, I am angry at you and I don't really know what I believe right now. And so I'm going to keep doing the work that I believe I've been called to do. But I don't know how much I can talk to you right now. I am mad.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, wow, what a horrible feeling to have, especially being in ministry. And I know I am not the only pastor who has felt that way,
No.
but it's really hard to own that and try
Yeah,
to like, right, like even admitting that is
yeah.
is hard. Um, so, when I got here, within a month of moving here, first of all, I should have, okay, wait. The word should is bad. I love this phrase and I hate it. It's stop shoulding on yourself because because should equals shame. Should equals shame. And so I'm not going to keep putting shame on myself and shoulding all over myself. It's really important.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna edit that to make sure it says shooting in like the captions that'll be on this video. But
Yes,
that is
yes. Let's be
that is gold, top tier.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But it's true though. What would have been better for me to do at the time is to really just dig into my healing and recover spiritually and all of those things. And I was in weekly therapy, but I had just moved to a new place. I was alone. I
Mm,
didn't have any family here.
yeah,
I had a few friends, but they were at the church that hired me, and I had only met them through the interview process. So they
yeah.
weren't really friends yet. And gosh, it was such a low moment in my life because I had just gone through a divorce.
Mm,
And it's stuff that I never saw coming. I mean, just like horrific things that absolutely shattered my heart, and then I had to make the choice to leave. And that was just horrible. So I was in this really low place, obviously angry at God. I was trying to finish my Master of Divinity, but I was exhausted. I was burned out. I was depressed. I had just started an antidepressant for the first time in my life, and I felt very lost.
yeah.
And so, within a month of moving to Albuquerque, I got on a Christian dating app because that's a great idea when you're in the middle of being really broken and not healed. Of course, you should get on a
I
dating
mean,
app.
you're down bad and you just need a hug, bro.
You just
Like
need a hug,
you just need a
but
hug. Like, let's be real.
well, well. So I went on a date with this person who was a pastor in Albuquerque, different church, different denomination. And when I met him, I felt like, wow, maybe these other things didn't work out. And maybe I felt led to Albuquerque in order to meet this specific person. It felt very like, you know, it felt very spirit led. It felt very romantic in that way. Um, Very quickly it became abusive and I didn't know what I was experiencing. And so I made choices that were informed by a trauma bond, which is where someone love bombs and then they devalue you. And so what happens is you get this dump of like dopamine or serotonin and you just are flooded. And I was already so depressed that it felt like, oh my gosh, I've needed this now for so long. I haven't, even in my marriage, I haven't been touched in like 5 years,
Yeah,
like that's,
yeah, yeah.
all of those factors were just awful, and so I fell very quickly in love with this person. And it also was a trauma bonded relationship where you get this chemical addiction to a person that is the same signature as someone who is, I think it's someone who's like on meth. I'm sorry,
Mm.
I can't remember specifically which drug
Yeah.
it is, but there's
Yeah.
like that level of chemical addiction in your brain that
Yeah.
happens in a trauma bonded relationship. So, I thankfully was able to get out of that and away from him, but not after significant trauma occurred. And
Yeah.
so I went from one traumatic situation into a
Mm.
deeply and even worse traumatic situation because of the abuse that was going on. And so that was, by the time I got away from him, it was October of 2022. And there was so much spiritual abuse in that where I made myself so small and believed him when he said, "Oh, you're lying about things and you don't even know that you're lying. You're flirting with other people and you don't even know that you're flirting, I guess. You say you don't know." These horrible accusations. Like that was just the
Yeah.
minimum. That's how it
Mm.
started.
Yeah.
And so I got very deeply into my healing journey from that point on. And
Mm.
so I went through Celebrate Recovery is a really awesome ministry. It's like AA, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
Christian-based recovery program. And so I got involved in weekly recovery group, a weekly step study, so a women's group specifically to like look at myself and say, what kind of junk is in here
Mm.
that has drawn me to these places in life? Why did I choose such horrible partners for myself? And not that, and not to speak ill of another person, but
Right. Right. Right.
the behaviors and the choices they made were awful. And
Mm.
I've also made awful choices, so I'm not judging it. I just, it was just horrible.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So all of that being said, in addition to a Monday night women's group, a Tuesday night recovery group, I also was doing weekly therapy every Thursday at 2:00. And just last week was the first week we changed from Thursdays at 2. And so I've been doing, essentially I did 3 days a week of therapy based
Yeah.
stuff for like 2 years
Mm.
and then continued therapy after that. So now it's been 3.5, at least 3 full years of weekly therapy.
Right.
All of that being said, I'm a huge advocate for mental health and obviously now like domestic violence and abuse and trauma. And that really informed the way I did ministry at that point, where I have this theological training and background and then my own personal journey through mental health and really like surviving abuse.
Mm.
And so in my therapy, I had to go back into the earliest years of my life and say, like, why was I drawn to these kind of men?
Well.
And those were some hard questions. And thankfully, I've been able to get those answers and heal some of the little wounded parts of me. If
Mm.
anyone listening is familiar with the internal family systems therapy, so IFS, that's what I did for years and I'm still doing that. But we talk about parts work. And so I see my little like wounded girl, and I'm
Mm.
able to be there with her in those moments and essentially reparent in
Mm.
places that might need it. So all of that informed the way I did ministry.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
a little backdrop there. And so my sermons were oftentimes about like, standing up for the truth. So whether that was for addressing like mental health issues or social justice issues, I
Mm.
became a very loud advocate for the least of these, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And in essence, like I was speaking up for myself in the
Mm.
ways that I was not spoken up for too. And
Right.
and I had to make sure that I was healing those parts of me. So it's not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like I'm not bleeding on everyone. It truly was coming from an informed place of healed,
Mm.
a healed self.
Yeah.
So, with all of that, a big part of my healing was recognizing so I have been codependent, I have been a people pleaser, and I have really struggled with caretaking other people's emotions. And what that meant for me was that I had a hard time being fully honest about my opinions, my wants, my needs, especially if it meant that someone might get angry at me. I was
Mm.
afraid of other people's reactions to me, and so I wanted to stay small or at least enough in the corner to where if I said something that was challenging, I could run out the door really quickly,
Mm.
and I could hide. I'm like, nope, I
Yeah.
don't want that. I don't want that. And so I was taught to not take up space, and I was taught how to play the game that other people taught me to play.
Mm.
Essentially, for me to become a DJ is like the weirdest thing to some people. They're like, what? Of everyone I've ever met in my life, you are not the one I imagined would be a DJ.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
Valid.
Valid. And it also has to do with the fact that I would have never felt like I could even be at a bar and play music, because when I had my first youth ministry job, I was told I couldn't have a drink in public anywhere. So I couldn't
Yeah.
have a glass of wine with my husband at dinner at a
Yeah.
restaurant
Yeah.
because a student might see me drinking.
Right.
And, there were these limitations and expectations that I was so afraid to do anything wrong because of my
Mm.
trauma, my
Yeah.
history with trauma.
Mm.
Oh my goodness. Hi, Junie. And I also have 2 dogs and 2
Yes.
cats. So my house is full. Sorry.
Hey, look, we got
It's
2
full of
dogs.
love.
Yes.
Yeah. Is the
Well,
best. Is the best.
technically 3 because we have a friend staying with us. But yeah, no, I
Oh,
understand.
good. Yeah. So I'm not really sure where I want to go from there. Oh, okay. Let me think. So, ultimately, I guess this trend of becoming more of me and feeling like, okay, maybe I can shake these religious chains that have put me in a box where they have put God in a box,
Mm.
like I believe that God is so much bigger than we can possibly imagine. I mean, we do our
Right.
best to understand God, and I feel strongly that, like, especially I believe the Wesleyan tradition is pretty
Mhm.
pretty solid,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's why I still practice in that way. But I also felt that, some of these restrictions were so maybe even unfair to, and not about drinking, but like other things, right?
Yeah,
Even
yeah, yeah, yeah.
restrictions that I ended up putting on myself, because I was like, oh, I can't do anything wrong. I've got
Yeah.
to be a people pleaser. I've got to succeed. I've got to be this high achieving person with a 4.0 in seminary and make
Mhm.
no mistakes. These perfectionist tendencies were so harmful, not just to me, but even to others. I had to go back and really work on that to say, gosh, y'all, God is a God of grace and mercy and forgiveness. I have missed the mark in
Mm.
that way.
Yeah.
And so I don't, it's probably not as bad as I am. See, I'm still a perfectionist. Even still, as I'm admitting to being a perfectionist, I'm still being hard on myself, right?
Yeah.
And so having to still learn that day by day. Albert, do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I can take a breath because like there's so much to the story,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I could
No,
just
no, no.
keep talking about it.
You're fine. Are you a 1 on the Enneagram? I can't remember.
I do test as a 1, but
Uh-huh.
I think that's more of a trauma response. I think I'm a
Yeah.
1 as a trauma. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I am diagnosed with complex PTSD, and
Mhm.
I've, actually had that diagnosis since my marriage, and
Yeah.
so the fact that more trauma has happened since then
Yeah.
just makes it a
Yeah.
little bit worse.
Well, I was
But yeah,
asking,
yeah.
because Kat is a 1 and she
Mhm.
mistyped when
Mhm.
she first took it. She was like a 6, and that's like
Ooh.
that's not Kat. And people they're like, "Oh, well, she could." I was like, "That's not her." But I think part of that is because that 1 is that perfectionist, or I think there's a different name. I can't remember off the top of my head, but more specifically in doing the
It's
right
the
thing.
idealist.
Yeah,
The
idealist.
idealist.
Yeah, because you want to do right, and you want people to do right by you. You want people to do right by others, and
Mhm.
and if it's not right, you call it. It's like, hey, look, I don't like it. And a good mentor friend of mine, really my DS, his wife
Mhm.
is a 1, and she is basically Cat in like 25 years. So
I love it.
like,
Yeah.
so ones, they're just, so yes, I think that's like part of it. Like, yes, there's absolutely trauma, but 2, like, you want stuff done right, and I think that's good.
Yes.
Like that's okay.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, and so, but I hear you too. So I don't want to like take away from that.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's both. I think it's both, and I think that there are some toxic traits of the 1 that are in my head because it was put in my head as a kid. Like I even sat with that voice the other night. I was being so self-critical about something, and I just
Mm,
stopped myself and I said, "Where is this voice coming from? Is
mm,
this actually me? Is this the
yeah.
voice of God? Because it doesn't sound like the voice of God,
Mm,
and it doesn't sound like a way I should be speaking to myself. So what
yeah.
is it?"
Yeah.
And I realized that, like, yes, I definitely have I think the healthy tendencies of a 1, of the
Hmm.
idealist, saying like, no, we need to be able to treat each other with love and dignity and respect. And
Right.
that's what makes me so loud for social justice.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, like, once I stopped preaching every week, it's only been like, a month, almost 2 months, I guess.
Right. Good
I
old
said,
appointment
I need to,
calendar.
yes, yes. But I realized I needed to keep speaking and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a pulpit from which to do that. And
Right.
so I started a blog
Yeah.
called The Progressive Pulpit. And
Mm-hmm.
the point of it was so that I could say, hey guys, this does not align with scripture.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying this is a Christian principle, let's
Mm-hmm.
test it. Let's see if
Yeah.
it actually is. Let's test, like, let's look at the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the fruit. It will
Yeah.
tell you if this is of God or not.
Mm.
And so that's the way I've been vocal and unapologetically vocal, even when
Yeah.
I've gotten some pushback from some folks who I've specifically identified their ideologies as being biblically inaccurate.
Mm.
And I'm just, now I feel kind of, because I'm not linked to the UMC anymore, I do
Mm.
feel a little bit unmuzzled.
Mm.
And not that the UMC put a muzzle on me,
Right.
but I was, having to stand in this middle space, stand the line, so
Mm.
that I could connect with people on all sorts of sides. And I still
Yeah.
want to be that way because I
Right.
want to offer this safe and compassionate space.
Yeah.
And at the same time, speak just as loudly as I was while I was a pastor,
Yeah.
maybe even more so now, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. No,
Just,
yeah. No, that
yeah.
completely makes sense. So like, for me with this new direction I'm going in terms of like content creating and future plans with, YouTube and Spotify and the Uncommon Legend experience and allowing myself to be like myself authentically, like the same person I am on this podcast is the same person I am in discipleship with a student, or the same person I am
Yes.
when I preach a sermon, but I can move a little bit quicker in this realm than I can
That's
in
a
that.
good way to put it. Yes.
And and the reason why I don't want to move as fast in ministry and all the other things is because I think I have a lot of growing to do personally and in that realm, and a lot to learn, and I got to make a lot more connections. And so, but once I do, then once I let the training wheels off, you're cooked.
Yeah.
Like it's
Cooked, fam. We're
yeah,
cooked.
I'm frying you, fricasseed, broiled, however you want it. Like you're cooked, right?
Hmm.
But in here, it's like I don't have the training wheels because this is the area or the arena of which I'm constructing. So like it has its own lane because I have to create the lane. And I think me and Kat were talking, like I've been doing this thing, and I'm probably gonna make a whole video, like YouTube video about it, like later on. I've been paying attention. The more I create, the more I'm paying attention to how other people create.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at YouTube and Instagram and all the things, and I'm finding myself less attracted to like some of these videos that are like really fast paced. And I'm like,
Hmm.
why are you editing so much? Like, yeah, that's cool, it's cute, but like, why is that so necessary? And I just had this epiphany that our society, our world is so distracted and so fixated on things that sound good right now, and not taking enough time to sit in it to say, will this sound good in a month or a year or 10 years?
Yeah.
Does this sound solid? And I think for you, kind of what I'm hearing is you're saying, I've sat in this so long enough to go, that ain't right. This is not
Yeah.
good. That's not good. And so for me, I'm doing it in my own way. And so if I build a big following, great. If not, I really don't care. I'm just trying to make space for people. I'll continue to motivate,
Yeah.
inform, inspire, and to love people, how I feel called to love. So
It's
yeah.
authentic to your calling. It's authentic to who God made you to be. And
Right.
that's exactly the sort of space that I'm creating just with a blog,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like I've really just started this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that where I have already created these authentic spaces outside of creator, I guess the creative side that's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
online is specifically with like my DJing world.
Yeah.
And, I love when things come full circle, Albert. Thank you for bringing us
Yeah.
back because your initial question was about like, calling and how all of
Mm-hmm.
these things are shaped over time, and
Yeah.
with the lens of our, who we are and who we're trying to be authentically, with the history of what has gotten us to the place in which we find ourselves now.
Mm-hmm.
It's so crazy because I thought I understood what my calling was early. I mean, kind of. I still was open.
Mm-hmm.
When I first received a call to ministry, I guess I was 17 at the time, and I
Yeah.
had been walking closely with God, and, Jesus softened my heart at a young age. I had
Mm-hmm.
the moment where my heart was strangely warmed when
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was only 9,
Yeah.
and it was 2 months before my parents divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is I leaned very deeply into my faith, and was reading scripture and all of that. And so I always felt something different, and I felt this closeness to God, and especially in the church, I said, wow, I feel like I am meant to be here and to
Mm-hmm.
lead here. And every time I went to a church, I felt that way. And so it started to take shape, and God brought clarity to that throughout my life. But at 17 is when I started getting these weird affirmations from different people who said the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And about, like, you're not going to reach just a small group of people, but you were called to touch a continent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? Why is that coming from 3 different people in the same
Yeah.
way? People who didn't know each other, and these same words about reaching a continent. That felt, if it had just come from me, I would have felt like it was arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
almost, but the fact that it was coming from different people in this, like, different ways, but it still was the same thing, was just like the affirmation I needed to be as open as I was in order to move to New Mexico.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was the calling that brought me here. I didn't just one day say, I like Albuquerque. There's a lot of murder there. That's where I should go.
Yeah.
Like, it
Let me just
wasn't.
pull up over there.
Yeah, that sounds great. No, it was that when I was in a seminary class, my professor heard my heart for church planting, and that I had already been doing some of that. And I actually got to practice some church planting stuff by starting a Bible study in a spin studio, starting a church in a spin studio in Mississippi. It was really cool. And it's what opened the doors for me to have a job offer here in Albuquerque with a church that was looking for a Fresh Expressions pastor. Fresh Expressions is just another way to talk about starting new churches, and essentially reaching people where they already are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just living life in places where people live, work, stop, June, sorry, where people live, work, and play. So, you can go to the dog park, you can go to the spin studio, you can go to
Mm-hmm.
the brewery down the street, and you
Yeah.
can, practice discipleship. And
Yeah.
that was my goal. And
Yeah.
so, the timing on all of it was so crazy, because I had the job offer in March of 21.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my ex-husband wasn't comfortable with moving, and I said, okay, like, we'll stay in Mississippi. And it was like one of the hardest moments, because I remember talking with a good pastor friend in Tupelo, and I said, I never thought I would have to choose between, like, my calling and my marriage.
Mm.
And it was a weird way to say it, because I knew I was also, like, my partner was a part of my calling.
Mm-hmm.
Being married is a calling, and, like, and
Yeah.
I wanted to choose my partner first. I wanted to, well, God first, but also prioritizing family over a job. That
Yeah.
was still
Yeah.
important to me. But then I found out 2 months later about some really horrible things that had been
Right.
happening behind my back, and I got so angry in that season, because I said, you took away from me what felt like I cried in the airport in Albuquerque,
Mm.
because I knew I wanted to be here back in
Yeah.
March of 21. And so I just, that year, not only did I get depressed, but I was angry, so angry. And it made it hard for me to be a good pastor.
Mm.
And, with all of that, I'm thankful God has brought me into a place of healing that
Yeah.
I needed. But I guess that to wrap up that part of the story is just that once I realized divorce was inevitable,
Mm.
unfortunately, I reapplied with the church, and they had stopped their search, because they were sure that I was the right candidate, and
Wow.
I was sure that I was supposed to be there.
Wow.
And they said, let's just hit pause on this. We'll figure it out. And so they offered the job, and I moved here the very end of 2021.
Yeah.
So I felt such that strong sense of calling and where I needed to go and needed to be. And I was open to this because of this calling to a continent, for
Mm.
whatever that means, whatever it means. I just knew
Yeah.
that God was trying to get rid of the boundaries that were in my mind, whether I put them there or someone else did.
Yeah.
So calling, I thought my calling was going to be to church plant.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be this. And then all of a sudden, while I'm serving at that church doing the thing,
Mm.
after like I had, the whole situation of abuse was happening during this time, left him, I was safe again. I was working in church planting, doing all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I get a call from my district superintendent asking if I would be the interim senior pastor.
Mm.
And I'm like, wait, what? What is happening? And so, of course, I said yes, because I was open to whatever the calling looked like. So then I became a senior pastor. It was so difficult, but there was so much work that needed to be done. And I tell you what, we dug up the floor, we dug up under the floorboards, cleaned everything out, and got that church back on track. And it was really
Yeah.
great. It was so hard, but it was great. And then I got moved to another new church
Mm-hmm.
as senior pastor. And again, a lot of digging up and cleaning, and there were a lot of challenges there.
Yeah.
And then ultimately some things outside of the local church happened that led me to realize, okay, it's time for me to go.
Mm.
The calling is shifting,
Yeah.
and I'm not really sure why. I don't know where this is leading. I do know that I have this church planter heart, and I've been in
Mm.
these communities as a DJ, as a spin
Yeah.
instructor,
Mm-hmm.
just church planting in the community already because so people know me.
Yeah.
So now what?
Mm.
And, so with that backdrop of just the way calling has taken shape over the years, I was a youth and college pastor, and then I was a church planter, and then a senior pastor, all by the age of 30.
Right.
What? Like,
Yeah.
that's, first of all,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
And like, and I think I have to name the challenges that come with also being a young woman
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
is that age
Yeah.
doing this kind of work, because
Mm.
I absolutely got some unfair criticisms that had nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with me. And
Yeah.
thankfully, my healing journey helped me to identify and realize, that the criticisms that came from people had much more to do with their expectations,
Mm-hmm.
not with the work I was doing.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other topic, I guess.
Yeah.
But that being said, so to answer your question about calling that we started way back then,
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beginning of this conversation, I don't know where God is leading me or how the calling is changing. I've been following God through every step of this evolving call.
Mm-hmm.
And, I hoped that it would just look like one thing and I could say,
Mm.
oh, yeah, I've got my retirement at the end of all of this and I'm good to go. My West Path benefits are great.
Yeah. The West Path.
The West
That's
Path
a deep cut
benefit.
from Methodist pastor type
Yeah,
stuff.
deep cut, deep cut.
Yeah.
So like it's a really odd season that I find myself in right now. And I honestly, I've probably overshared with this. I hope this story and my decision to be okay with living in the gray
Mm.
may be comforting to someone,
Yeah. Yeah.
because so much of my life was living in this space of black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I was coming from Mississippi where there was a certain way to live, a certain way to be, and
Yeah.
especially as a young woman from the South.
Yeah.
And then, still feeling like I was fighting this, not just feeling like it, I was fighting
Yeah.
this whole war of people who disagreed with women being pastors the
Mm.
whole time. And then when I moved out here to New Mexico, I wasn't people weren't surprised that I was a woman who was a pastor. They
Mm.
were surprised that I was a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
that whole worldview is so dramatically different. And it helped me realize we can't just do ministry in one way and expect it to work everywhere. I had studied that in seminary, talking about
Yeah.
cultural context and cultural ministry, cross-cultural ministry. And
Mm-hmm.
man, getting to live it out in so many different ways has been one of the greatest blessings of my life, honestly, because I mean, I still have been in largely white churches, which,
Mm-hmm.
out here, there's a large Hispanic and indigenous population. So it's,
Hmm.
so of course there's a mixture of brown as well, white
Right.
and brown, but there's not really a Black culture here in New Mexico
Yeah.
either. And that was, I'm sure we could get into the nuances of all of that too, but
Hmm.
so out here I had to learn, how can I still fight for equality and justice for new groups of people whom I still have to hear their stories. I have to learn their stories. I have to
Yeah.
learn how to be a pastor in a predominantly white church, but still understand the stories of all of the people represented here.
Yeah.
And doing the due diligence to just learn, about my surroundings
Hmm.
and about the people I was growing to love.
Hmm.
So I am grateful for whatever boxes I had put myself in or had been put in. I'm grateful that being in a new context allowed me to open the lid and peek out a little bit to then get into the season where I'm out of the box entirely.
Yeah. Man,
So
that's good stuff.
there's so much there, Albert. I'm sorry. I could talk forever and ever about
No,
so
no.
many things. And that's
Yeah.
why we get along so well.
Yeah, it is. It is. And if you're still here listening, we appreciate you because, this is I feel like this is a good conversation. And, I think everything you've said in that, understanding that, I mean, heck, you're still like so young. Although I was telling a friend
Mm.
earlier, like I feel 28 years old, and she was like, I'm 28 years young, and I'm like, I'm gonna be 29 next month, and my back hurts.
And then we're going to go back and listen to this, Albert, in like 20 years.
Yeah, yeah,
And be
yeah.
like, oh yeah, oh the 20s, how nice.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I was like, oh, like Kat looks at me the other day, and she goes, "Oh, you're so great." And students, I show students a photo of me 4 years ago, no gray hair and a beard, and it's just so interesting. There's been so much life lived, but yet still so much more to live beyond this. And I think that's
Yeah.
like the very interesting thing about these late 20s, early 30s, or right at 30,
Mhm.
like that we're just on the cusp of starting
Yeah.
adulthood. One of the things my mom told me years ago, I tell my students, I think she told me first, or we just ended up talking about it. But like, at 18, you're an infant adult.
Mhm.
You're a baby adult. By the time you're 21, you're a toddler.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just got out of throwing temper tantrums, right? In terms of an adult, because at 21, you're I mean, you're still almost in diapers. You have no idea what it means to pay bills, to have like true responsibilities quite yet, unless you do,
Mhm.
and because you've had a difficult life. And so forgive me if I'm,
Mhm.
speaking out of term, but like, I mean, by the time I was 22, I was doing hard things, but not like I'm doing now,
Right.
and it's like there's a certain type of gravity that I'm preteen adult now, where I've been doing this
Yeah.
adulting thing for 10, 11 years now. I tell people I'm basically 29. I'm 29 with 11 years of ministry experience, 7 being in
Mhm.
campus ministry. So when I walk into the room, I'm no longer the noob. I'm the dude with like tenure, like
You're the expert.
I'm
You're
the
the
I'm the
expert.
expert now, and that's
Yeah.
strange. That's a weird feeling, but also I have so much to learn, and I have so much to do, and so it keeps me in this tension of, man, I've messed up so much, I've done so much, but also, man, shoot, I've got so much that I can do with this.
Right.
I appreciate your story because like you've gone through all these things and you've found healing, you've found hope, and you're looking to the other side, and the
Mhm.
calling is changing. And a good colleague of mine says that you know, the calling stays the same, but the assignment changes. And I think that's a really
Mm.
good thing. It's like my assignment might change, but and I actually tell this to my students all the time. Remember who you are and whose you are. And I got that from you, Mary.
Oh,
Like who you are and whose you are, that is always going to be consistent. Like you are always going to be Mary, and you're always going to be God's child. but he might be calling you something different, you know.
Yeah.
But because of that constant, you know, it doesn't matter where you go from here.
Yeah.
You have that constant of, okay, assignment changes, new place, new opportunity, but I know who I am and whose I am. A different thing I go do because of those things. I have this embodied faith and this embodied identity that
Mhm.
allows me to be who I need to be in this new place and space.
I
As
love
we,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. Just the
yeah,
embodied
oh,
calling,
yeah,
like it's the incarnational ministry to which we're called,
mm,
Jesus modeled it and taught us how to do it.
yeah,
And so the school where I'm working now is a Presbyterian school, and
mm-hmm,
it's pretty amazing how I get to live out the calling even in that setting.
yeah.
And just I get sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up, so I'll
No,
I'll
no,
be
no, no.
quick
You're,
with this. But I had a friend who he's an exceptional pastor and
mm,
mentor to me, and he is the one who taught me about this idea of co-vocational ministry. So it's
mm-hmm,
not just bivocational ministry, it's like choosing to live authentically in both, where you can
mm,
have a day job and still be a minister,
yeah,
and I guess I'm figuring out what that looks like in a different and authentic kind of way right now.
mm,
I don't know. DJing to me is just a fun thing. I love
yeah,
doing it. I love that I get to be in these spaces where people do know about my Christian faith too. And so I
mm,
get to live out the love of Christ in my interactions and the way I do
yeah,
it. But I don't always play clean music. I mean, I'm playing
mm,
at the club,
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so, like, it is so much more about the embodied nature of calling, I think, like you
mm,
said, and really just embodying Christ, living in Christ, and remembering the simplicity of the gospel,
mm,
coming back to that, of that it's
yeah,
about the way we love God and we love others.
mm,
And wow, is it impactful. You're not
yeah.
going to argue someone into faith in most cases. You'll love
No,
them to it, but
yeah.
not argue them to
You're not
it.
gonna
And
argue him. No.
and I will say that so the movie that came out last summer or the summer before, Oppenheimer, sorry, I
Yeah.
mean,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
so
Gosh, that's like
that's
2 years
about,
ago now.
I know it's crazy how fast time goes, but that movie is based on Los Alamos, which is
Mm-hmm.
here in New Mexico, just like an hour north of Albuquerque. And so
Mm.
we also have Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, or labs, whatever. Sorry to my friends who work there. I'm calling your job site the wrong place, I'm sure. But brilliant minds, like literal rocket scientists that are
Yeah.
everywhere in Albuquerque and New Mexico. And that's one thing that's been interesting about being in a place as a Christian where Christianity is not it's not the cool thing to do or be,
Mm-hmm.
not in the
Mm-hmm.
same way it was in the Bible Belt.
No.
And so as I'm talking to literal rocket scientists, I'm not going to argue them into faith at
No.
all. And I
No.
learned that very quickly moving here, and that it is, the movement and the work of the Spirit, but also just living in love and treating others in the way that Christ has modeled for us.
Mm.
Being in that incarnational ministry of living among people, not judging people, but living among them. It
Yeah.
is such a powerful, powerful way of doing ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah. So, I think that's so awesome, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And I always I'm trying to get in this rhythm where I pass it off to you. You got any questions for me? Where like you maybe you have something.
Well, Albert, I'm curious to just hear your perspective.
Mm,
As someone who I've known now for many years, you're watching a friend too who has gone
mm,
through all of these things, all of the
yeah.
challenges in life, and then also now in this moment where we're connecting, talking about all of these things. it's
Hmm.
it's kind of crazy looking at
Yeah.
that whole story, and I'm just curious what it calls out within you, and maybe ways that it's, how do I ask that question? I guess maybe just in the way that it is impacting you in your life, and how you can reflect it back, if there's anything that stands out to you that can or should be reflected back.
Yeah. So I think if I can answer this question the way that I feel as though it should be, like,
Don't should on yourself, Albert.
oh my gosh. But in the in
Yeah.
the most like authentic way,
Yeah.
I think like the big full circle thing or the big like motif theme is be so relentless in like your friendship in your relationship with people that like nothing separates you. Unless that person goes, get out of my face, don't do anything. Like I know I want nothing to
Yeah.
do with you.
Yeah. We honor boundaries. We honor
Yeah, yeah,
boundaries
yeah.
here. That's good.
You tell me to leave you alone. Yeah, hey, look, say less. I'm out. You know, of having that feeling of like I think I need to reach out to this person. You know, for me, I know that was the stirring of the Holy Spirit going, I I need you to do this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it woke me up in the middle of the night. At my wife, you know, for those of y'all watching that might not know Kat, you know, Kat and I would be talking, and I go, I think I need to reach out to Mary right now.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, well, what are you talking to me for? Go do it. Like, you know, just like, have you sent the text? Have you reached out to her? Or she would go like, hey, have you heard from Mary a little bit? And I was like, no, I haven't. She goes, you should reach out to her, you know. And also finding somebody that understands like who you are and is not trying to change you or make you something. Like I think I'm super blessed by that with Kat, and in previous relationships that was not the case. And so dating and marrying Kat was like really good for me because there was no, this is the only way you can operate as a husband, as a boyfriend, and all the things. This is all you can do now. Delete all your female friends' numbers out your phone because they're gonna cause you to stumble or some crazy thing like that. I don't know, but like, you know, she, if she could, she'd become friends with whomever I was friends with. Like not for the sake of
Mm-hmm.
like let me commandeer this friendship to make sure it's safe, but rather like she's genuinely interested,
Yeah.
you know. But like the relentless pursuit of your friends though, and just being like an absolute like an absolute friend is, even if I don't hear anything, I'm still here, you know. And I have a friend right now going through a really tough patch. He sadly, like, you know, long story short, he was in campus ministry with me and he is no longer in campus ministry with me for a multitude of reasons. And I won't share his story, but if he watches this, I'm not going to say your name, but you know who you are and I love you. Like him right now, I'm actually a lot more of a knucklehead and hard headed with him. I'm calling him every single week and I'm
That's
texting
awesome.
him. And I called him last week and he didn't answer. He couldn't answer. And he was like, hey, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, 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 you're fine. I'm not gonna stop until I hear your voice. And I say that because the people that have done that for me, you know, of like, hey, you're not good right now.
Yeah.
And I don't care that you're not good, but I'm here. You know, like I don't you don't have to, you don't have to be perfect with me, you know, like you can be yourself and you know, you can allow me to just be here with you to sit in it. You know, it's like Job's friends were good until they said something kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like just trying to be that type of friend that like I don't have to say all the right things. I just want to sit with you. I think that's something I've learned.
That's so good, Albert, because like you are genuinely that kind of person. And I just want to, I will get emotional if I'm not careful. So I'm going to be careful. But, you know, especially when I moved here and like, I remember especially like 2022, 23. God, no, always, forever. I was about to
Yeah.
remember what year you were the most persistent, but you've always been. But I was going back into my memory there. You know, like there were some days where I could only send a short message back and you still are
Mm,
so you are relentless in that way for your friends and that is a way that like it inspires me to be with my friends too, my other
yeah.
friends because like,
Yeah.
you know, and I've, you know, when I didn't have the energy to be that person, I am
Mm,
so grateful for those who step in the space and can be that for others.
yeah.
You know, like I have a little bit of pain around that because, you know, when I was in the middle of my like abusive relationship and I was still hurting and depressed and broken from, you know, a divorce, like
Yeah.
it was just a slew of horrible things. And I had some people reach out like once or
Mm.
twice when I moved, and
Yeah.
I was so broken, and like the person I was with was monitoring my phone and like isolating me, didn't want me to respond to people. I felt so like almost abandoned after that when
Yeah.
I tried to reach out to people after and I never heard anything back.
Right.
And so, it just reminds me that we don't know what people are going through. We don't know
Mm-mm.
the whole story. And
No.
like, I appreciate that you never took, a small response back or a non response back as personal
Yeah.
because, that is where it has inspired me with my friends. And
Mm.
I say my friends, you're a friend, right? And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
check in
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about my other friends, right?
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
friends. And
I'm
I'm
the only
thinking
friend.
about, you're the only friend that I have, Albert. Like, you know what? You would be enough. You're cool enough. It's fine. But, it does remind me that, even with these other people, I'm like, no, I've chosen real ones in my life. And
Mm.
I'm going to continue to love them through all of these seasons, even if they can't be good friends in that season.
Yeah.
And it is different. Like, unfortunately, I did have to cut someone out of my life last summer, and it was someone who had been a friend for almost 20 years. It was so hard. It was so
Yeah.
hard. But this person there was a lot of racism and homophobia that just got
Yeah.
really, really bad. And, we got into a
Well.
fight about it. And it's like, well, and I said, look, I can't, I can love someone through it, but it got to a point where it was too harmful to continue. So there are
Mm.
boundaries.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think, though, like in so many cases, that is not the case.
Mm.
And so being patient and walking with people through every season, no matter what it is, like God gives us the strength to do that.
Yeah.
It's not a journey that we do alone because it still is ministry.
Mm.
In the way we love our closest people, that's ministry too.
Yeah.
So, we are a part of the priesthood of all believers.
Right. Hey,
But so
look.
I just want to build you up in that you
Yeah.
really, you are an inspiration in that, I think, for a lot of people. So
I appreciate that.
yeah. So anyone listening, you can actually do it. Albert has
Yeah.
proven that you can. So
Yeah. No, and like even Jamal, if you're watching this, you're my boy. Me and Jamal talk every week, like
I
every
love
single
it.
week. He and I talk, and it doesn't matter, if we have to change days or whatever or formats, because normally we're playing video games and talking, but sometimes we have to switch it up and call each other. Like I called, like if there's something going on, I'm like, hey, I feel like we weren't really present to each other this week on the game. Like, are you okay? Like, or like, hey man, like I feel like I wasn't a good friend to you here. Like, hey, was there more you needed to share? Because even if I'm trying to be good, I still mess up, and I try to be very introspective with that. Not so much so that I'm like always running myself ragged kind of thing,
Yeah.
but rather like, okay, like I could probably go a step further here. I can do this better, these things. But yeah, no, I really try to embody that, and I try to, display that in a really authentic way. But
Well, and
yeah,
you have the humility that makes that possible, right? When we can
yeah,
acknowledge these things about ourselves and that's what like the recovery group, going back
mm,
into that, like it was
yeah,
week by week soul searching to
mm,
to make me say, I need to let this pride that I still hold snap in half.
yeah,
Get rid of any pride that is here so that I can be the most honest and authentic kind of friend who shows up and can apologize when wrong, can
mm,
accept like criticism and feedback,
right,
but also move through it and forward, with a repentant heart and hopefully do better.
mm,
So humility, I think, is such an important part of our relationships and being able to love one another authentically. It's the admission of guilt or sin.
yeah,
That's a hard thing to do.
yeah, not for sure. Well, look, I appreciate you so much for joining me today and sharing with everybody here. I think it's a true gift, and I thank you for sharing it with us. So, that being said, thank you, and I appreciate your time, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and look forward to more to come. So, be good, y'all. Peace, love, and hair grease.